My name is Cristobal Mancillas, and I was working for Causa this summer as a part of my McGill Lawrence internship, protecting immigrant and Latino rights. So what Causa is really about is about empowering communities to tell their own stories. And so as I integrate this presentation, I'm also going to be integrating some of the stories of the people I met, as well as some of the stories that Causa is using as a part of the 100 Days of Stories campaign, to kind of illustrate what I mean by this driver card, and also what I mean by civil rights organizing. So Causa is the largest network of Latinos in the Pacific Northwest. They're a nonprofit dedicated to helping Latinos and immigrant rights generally, but they also participate in legal services, civic engagement, and community organizing projects, amongst like the 100 Days of Stories campaign, voter registration. So there are a diversity of tasks that I completed in my internship. But our main focus was Measure 88, a current bill that's going to be on the next ballot, also known as the Safe Roads Act, which would provide a driver card to any resident in Oregon, regardless of citizenship status. And while this is a variety of different reasons why this might be a good idea, what I'm going to really focus on is la falta de la identidad, or what it really means to be an Oregonian and how this relates to people's stories. And so this primarily manifested itself in 100 Days of Stories, or 100 Días de las Historias. So this gathered a variety of different people's perspectives and how the driver card impacted their lives, as well as a kind of process for ways of understanding one's story and also coping with oppression. And so I'm going to begin with Ramiro. Now, Ramiro was a chauffeur, and so when he lost his license, it directly impacted his livelihood. But there's one particular moment that I'd like to remember and recall and share with all of you. And that was a moment when his child was screaming and he needed to go to the hospital, and he had to make the decision between driving without a license or taking his son to the hospital. And that was a difficult decision that he had to make. Cristina, a coworker of mine, often described the way her mother was unable, because she was undocumented and didn't have a license, was unable to take her to after-school events, unable to take her to places where she wanted to go, and how that impacted her educational performance. Mayra, a dreamer, undocumented, unafraid, and proud, and related her experience and the reasons why she's currently a PSU student and why she had difficulty commuting to class every day, and how that impacted her perspective on education. I was also fortunate enough to meet a variety of different people from a variety of different walks of life, including Linda. So the first day I met her, she was inside the Causa's office, and she just looked at me and she says, "Do I know you?" And I was like, I was really just confused. I'm like, "No." She's like, "Well, you do now." And she immediately talked to me about what was going on in Portland politics. And she particularly described to me why people need a driver card, because if you don't have the ability to drive, you can't get health care. And for her, that was ultimately one reason why we needed the driver card. Maria, she described her own personal experience in relating to her parents, who were farm workers and working in the field, and how she couldn't quite understand why a single piece of paper, which proved that she was born in the United States, made her somehow different than her parents. We were also active in field organizing, which meant we were at protests, events, churches, schools, throughout all of Oregon every day of the week, which included protesting or just talking to people about social services. But it was still a part of a broader mission. And one of the important aspects of this mission was creating cross-cultural communication within different communities. Specifically, we emphasized working with Basic Rights Oregon and relating like an LGBTQ focus and intersection with Latino protection and Latino rights. And what that meant and manifested itself into terms of transvisible screenings, what that meant in identity and story sharing as a process of healing. What does it mean to truly share your story? And this, again, often manifested themselves in rallies where people would raise their voice and say, "This is what's wrong, what we need to do." And it was also an opportunity for people to get to know each other, to create art, and to be an individual part of a greater movement. And so the rallies had a very specific messaging, in that there's nothing more American than an immigrant. And it allowed people who were consistently afraid of the police, people who were afraid of their documentation status being called out and questioned, change that and put themselves in a space where they took risk and were proud of who they were. And this was a fundamental part of our mission. However, we also had to switch gears, because we are also primarily concerned with giving material resources to people who need it, including DACA services. So for people who come here as children, often don't have documentation, but are at risk of getting deported. And so we gave them the process and paperwork to get deferred action. And this is particularly important because of the humanitarian crisis that's happening at the border, as thousands of people are crossing, often unaccompanied minors. And so we went to the United States Homeland Security Office with different people, this is Ramon Ramirez and Reina Lopez, my boss, and argued why this humanitarian crisis impacts Oregonians, people in this room. I met with David Morales, who shared his story about how he went to going to be his first year as a college student and was deported, and his experience in an ICE hold and what that meant to him in terms of understanding what policy truly affects people and what being an immigrant really means. And as a result, he created an application which showed people their rights. And so while I'm describing to you all these events and experiences of other people, it's impossible for them and those experiences to separate from my own personal identity. That the values of storytelling and the way that I'm communicating these values are also a part of who I am and what empowerment means to me. And what does it truly mean to be an ally to other communities? And what does it also mean to be proud of who I am? And so what I also want to emphasize is the need for action here at Reed and also in Oregon. And I want to encourage folks to get involved with whatever community you can to be able to push for greater change, whether that's a federal work-study position with Causa, whether that's working for the intercultural organizing, or whether that's actively working towards an honor principle that is truly honorable. And for this work to happen, it requires each one of us to find our own space where we can tell our own story, be our own person, and own up to our own experience. This is just more than safe roads. This is about safe communities, and this is about understanding the meaning of what community and what dreams can become.